Well, hey guys, how are you today? I hope that you are all doing really well. You know, our story this week is one of my favorite. It's about Jonah and Jonah and the big whale. You guys probably have heard about that one. Some people call it a fish, a whale, but it's all about Jonah, and that's an awesome story. But do you remember how last week we talked about listening and how Samuel was listening and he heard God calling him? And Samuel was a prophet. Do you remember that word? Samuel was a prophet. Well, Jonah was also a prophet, and God talked to him and spoke to him, and Jonah helped God as one of his messengers. But before we go any further, I want to ask you guys a question. Do any of you ever remember a time when somebody has asked you to do something and you really didn't want to do it? Like you stomped your feet and you said, no, I don't want to do that. Have you guys ever done that before? Maybe your mom made bean soup and you didn't want to eat the soup because, you know, bean soup is now probably most kids' favorites. And so you stomp and you're like, no, I don't want to eat that. Or maybe you had to clean the bathroom or clean your room or go do your homework or something. I bet probably most of us have, even I at times have like thrown a little tantrum about, I don't want to do something. Well, do you ever get in trouble when you refuse to do something? Like mom, dad ever put you in time out? Yeah, that happens too, for not doing what you've been asked to do. Well, Jonah in our story today did not want to help God. He kind of threw a tantrum. He said, no, I really don't want to do this. And God wanted him to go and talk to some people who really weren't very nice. Jonah would consider them his enemies. And who wants to go and talk to their enemies, right? Well, Jonah didn't think that they would listen to what he had to say. Perhaps he thought that they would bully him or make fun of him. And so Jonah was saying, no, I don't want to do this. Well, our world friends today are also learning how to face some situations that they don't want to be in. And so let's check to see what they're up to first. All right.
Mimi, we're partners.
We are? That's amazing! What are the odds?
Well, pretty good, actually.
So I guess that means you and I are partners, Leo. Fine, I can live with that.
No, actually, I'm partners with Jamila.
Hello, I am very excited to be part of and to contribute to this team. What are we doing?
Making large dioramas of Jonah and the whale.
Well, if you two are partners, and you two are partners, then who am I? Is Bert standing right behind me with a slip of paper? Yep. Does it have my name on it? Uh-huh. Great. Just great.
I can hear you, you know.
Sorry, I'm just not super excited to work with Bert the class bully.
Well, sorry, I'm not excited to work with you.
Apology accepted? Come on, let's get this over with. See you guys later, unless Bert chains me to a bike rack or something.
Any of you want to trade partners?
If I was with Gabe, those would be glued already. Or Leo. Leo would already have this thing built with little robots walking all over it.
There.
Great. What part of the diorama of Jonah inside a whale is that?
I don't know.
Feel better?
No.
Then stop breaking our sticks.
You know who would be good at this? Dean.
Who's Dean?
My friend from my old school. I should be doing this with him.
Wait, what are you upset about? You get to work with me.
A lot of fun that's been.
You get to break stuff. You love to break stuff.
I don't like breaking stuff. It just happens sometimes, and it doesn't help when you're being so bossy.
Don't call me bossy, bully.
Don't call me bully, bossy.
All right, I won't.
Good, that makes me feel better.
Then why are we
All right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do a good job on this.
And I'm sorry I just kept being way too honest about everything. I just had planned on being with one of my friends for this.
I'm sorry I messed up your plan.
Well, I guess it wasn't anything you did.
Tiny robot legs for the diorama. Spectacular.
We have to beat them.
Yes, we do.
Your hand was covered in glue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not at all like I planned it.
So, have you ever ended up working on a project with somebody who isn't your friend? I don't know if somebody that you would really not want to work with, maybe somebody that you would consider a little bit like your enemy. Well, that's what happened to Ruby, wasn't it? Yeah. She really didn't want to work with Bert. And Bert, on the other hand, thought that Ruby was pretty bossy. So I would say that it was kind of a two-way street, that neither one of them wanted to work with each other, did they? Well, that's not really all that much fun, to be put in a project with somebody you don't want to work with. And sometimes we can feel really reluctant to want to do something that we don't really feel so good about. Maybe we can even want to stomp our feet and say, no, I don't want to. But that's not really what God calls us to do, isn't it? So how did Ruby's attitude change as the project went on? So at the very beginning of the project, I think that she had a bad attitude, didn't want to be there. She was not very nice to Bert. She was being bossy and rude, like we said. But as she started working with him, she learned that Bert really wasn't such a bad guy, was he? Bert kind of sometimes acted like a bully, but he wasn't really the bully that she feared. I think Bert sometimes feels hurt by other people, and he probably pulls himself inside because he doesn't want to get hurt either. Well, sometimes we think that jobs that we've been asked to do are going to be too difficult, right? Too difficult, we don't want to do them, we just don't really know how to start, and maybe we don't think it'll be worth the effort. But sometimes, if we give those jobs a chance, we can be very surprised, just like both Ruby and Bert were surprised when they got to know each other a little bit better. Well, in our story today, God wants Jonah to go and talk to the people of Nineveh. And Jonah considers those people to be like really mean and his enemies. And so he's like, yeah, I don't think so. I really don't want to. But God wants him to go and share his message so that the Ninevites have a second opportunity to change their ways. Jonah's not so sure. Let's read our story today. It's called it's from the Jesus Story Bible book. Your regular reading out of the regular Bible was only supposed to be like 5 verses after he's already been spit out by the whale. And this is way too good of a story to not read the whole thing. So we're going to read it out of this book today. Are you ready? Here we go. It's called God's Messenger. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, said Jonah. Those are bad people doing bad things. Exactly, said God. They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them. No, said Jonah. They don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah said to himself, far away, so far away that God won't be able to find me. He thought this was a good plan. But of course, it wasn't a good plan at all. It was a silly plan, because you can't run away from God, because he will always find you. Jonah went ahead with his not so very good plan. 1 ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat, sailing in the very opposite direction of Nineveh. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew, and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll. Jonah sat bolt upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God had sent a big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they screamed and started throwing everything overboard, suitcases and food and whatever they could find. By now, Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. "Throw me in instead," he shouted to the sailors, "and the storm will stop." The sailors weren't sure. "It's the only way you can be saved," Jonah cried. And so 1, 2, 3, splash. No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm. The wind died down and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, when he was sure he was going to drown, God sent a big fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed Jonah whole with one big gulp. Jonah must have thought he died. It was so dark in there. But when he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed, he knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of the fish. Sitting there in the darkness for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon he realized that his plan was, well, a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away. He prayed to God from inside the great fish and asked God to forgive him. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely out onto the sandy beach. Just then, Jonah heard someone calling his name. "Go to Nineveh," God said. And this time, Jonah said yes. He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. Even though you've run far from God, He can't stop loving you, Jonah told them. Run to Him so He can forgive you. The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah, and they started loving God. That's a good story, isn't it? Yeah. So what did we learn from Jonah's experience? What did we learn? Well, you can refuse to do something, can't you? And you can have a fit about it. But you can't hide from God, can you? God knows where you are all the time. Even if you've run away on a ship, God can find you. Yep. And God put Jonah in a great big timeout, didn't He? For 3 days in the belly of a fish. Yeah, that would be kind of stinky, wouldn't it? But God found him. God gave Jonah some time to rethink. And then God gave Jonah a second chance, didn't He? A second chance to go and share His message. And God also gave the people of Nineveh a second chance to change their ways, didn't they? And they did. They changed their ways. Which also means that sometimes we don't know exactly whether, when we tell somebody what God wants them to hear, whether or not we know whether they'll listen, whether they'll change their ways, whether they'll love God more, they'll forgive each other, and they'll be more kind. We don't know that, but God does. And God is always giving people second chances, isn't He? Well, God gives us second chances too. And sometimes, even when we're reluctant to do things, He'll wait and He'll be patient. So your leaflets today are called Jonah and Nineveh. I hope that you have fun doing them together, and we will see you again next week. Bye.